Radar Update. My name is Daniel Vallis from InformedChristians.com, a website ministry devoted to discerning current events from a Christian perspective. Thank you to all those who keep sending in news, tips, and articles and things you come across. It is a great help, and I am so glad you all are watching. And thank you so much for those who pray for this ministry, who pray for our needs, and pray for me. I need strength. I need wisdom. And there is so much gratitude for those who help hold the ropes. Thank you. This is a warning. It's not a prediction. We have seen the calls for peace and safety. We know sudden destruction is very close, but we do not know the future. We have a lot to go in today, and recently we've been looking at how D-Day, basically the switch of the year, they were pushing to get everything ready toward then, but since then we've seen some extremely blatant messaging that basically they are all set and they are all ready. Satan does not know the day or hour, but he does know the time frame, and so do we. We will see the day approaching. We have already heard the calls for peace and safety. That means our time is limited. We are already taking on water. We are losing time. Sudden destruction is looming. So what are some things that have happened lately? Well, on the 7th was the announcement of a plan to rebuild the Colossus of Rhodes. And this was in the Popular Mechanics magazine website too as well. And they mentioned that the Colossus of Rhodes, the historical one, was a statue of Helios, the Greek Titan god of the sun. And who have we been covering a lot lately? Lucifer, Apollo, Apollyon, the sun god, all those types. And so it's very suspicious that this is brought up right now, especially when we've been seeing almost on a daily basis the push for the illuminated pyramid and Lucifer, and there's been almost major signals almost every single day. But then the very next day was David Bowie's Black Star released. A very dark and disturbing music video that he put out. And I'm not going to try to interpret it because it's very disturbing. But it's not too hard to see that they did just like they did in the Sherlock Holmes, using the same pyramid and light pattern as well, pushing that symbolism because it's all tied together. This is another blatant push for Lucifer and the fact that the mystery of iniquity, the pyramid, the work that they've been working toward is now about to be completed. And they're celebrating and they're so excited. And just in the past 11 days, they've been pushing out multiple reminders to Satan's disciples of this very fact, that it's almost here. They are ready. And in this film, they have some old Bibles on the floor thrown down there. It's a very blasphemous video mocking the crucifixion as well. And he also seems to be mocking the calls for repentance. But then just 3 days after he released that film, he died at the age 69, which is a symbolic number to them. And of course, we had just recently talked about Katy Perry's Pepsi commercial, and we had talked about the figure referencing possibly Elvis. And what you got to think of is it's not referencing necessarily Elvis. When she's talking about bringing someone back or to this time, what we were looking at yesterday was not Elvis. Don't get caught up on the personalities. Look at the archetype. What are they representing? Their symbolism. So when they were pointing to that time in the mid-60s and the singer there with the more classical rock, and we looked at the big heavy symbolism with Elvis, she was basically pointing at the archetype that Elvis was set up there. And also remember, Lucifer was in charge of the music in heaven. You know, these two concepts, music, musicians, and these light and phoenix symbols and patterns, they all go together. And so it should not surprise you that we find the music industry one of the biggest promoters of the symbolism and parables used by Satan. So we looked at a lot of that the other day and how Katy Perry, in a sense, I hate to use the word channel, but brought a lot of the pattern type that Elvis had. She was basically signaling and messaging that this is coming now. And she was bringing it and tapping into that symbolism. And we have to look at the same thing with David Bowie. Don't get attached necessarily to the person. We have to look at what does he represent? What is the archetype that he's been portraying? And so he's been in a lot of fantasy things, occult things, and he was definitely involved in the occult and Crowley and all that sort of stuff. When we look at his very first film that he was in, because he is also an actor, The Man Who Fell to Earth. Wow, that should ring some bells. This is the movie poster for the very first one. An inverted pyramid. And it's all about an alien. And notice the big emphasis on the one eye again. And also reptilian eye in the reflection of the water. A reference to his serpent aspect of what Lucifer is and Satan. But he portrayed an alien who came from a dry and desert planet. And that reminds us what Scripture describes the unclean spirits and all them as dwelling in. So he portrayed an alien, and they played on the fact that he naturally had 2 different eyes because of an incident that happened in his teenage years. But that is also very important and is played upon. So this was his very first film, The Man Who Fell to Earth. But then the very last film that he was involved in was called The Prestige, and that was in 2006 by the director of Batman Begins, Christopher Nolan. And he had a small part in this, but he played Nikola Tesla. Very interesting. And a big emphasis on light and fields of light, but then they strongly associate the character with lightning too as well. So this actor who played in his first movie, The Man Who Fell to Earth, and his last film associated with lightning and electricity and the wonders of Tesla and using technology, but in the film the Tesla character makes a trapezoidal uncapped pyramid. And that plays prominently throughout the movie, in the film. It's part of the lying wonders that are used in the film. So he played this character, and one of the taglines of the film was, "Are you watching closely? Are you watching?" There's going to be some tricks and manipulation and lying wonders by these archetypes and who they represent. So he released his Black Star on the 8th, and he died on the 10th. Well, on the 9th, the trailer for Lucifer came out, the show that's showing on Fox channel, Lucifer. And it's a television version of DC Comics' Lucifer character. And so they released the trailer on the 9th, and they show him, among other things, playing with a coin. And they zoom in so you could definitely see the sides of it. And wait a minute, that looks familiar. And then the other side, they have Baphomet and the pentagram. But then they make a point of showing this Lucifer character interrupting a wedding. And he goes up to the couple and he says, "You're not marrying this human stain because you're actually in love with him, right?" And the bride answers, "God, no." And we talked before about how Hollywood uses taking God's name in vain in a double fashion. They will use it to deliberately take God's name in vain. But then they will also use it as a pattern to show either their god, they're going to either have it coupled visually with the pattern of their god Apollo, Apollyon, or they will use it as a direct reference with a second layer of messaging to refer to God, the true God. And what Satan is portraying in this visual parable that he's painting here, a trailer for Lucifer, and we've seen this before and I've pointed out before, he is giving a legal notice to the church, the true bride of Christ. You know, Satan is the accuser of the brethren, and he even accused Job. And what was the test that he wanted to do with Job? He wanted to prove that Job did not truly love God. And God allowed him to perform that test. Satan, our accuser church, has served legal notice that he is testing God's bride to see if they really love him. He's giving legal notice. He has been giving warnings. He knows what Scripture says, and he's giving legal warnings in a sense so that he could hold it up in God's face one day when he comes back for his bride and says, "Nope, these people here, they don't love you, and I've proven it." Satan knows the warnings that Christ wrote in the letters to the 7 churches. And he knows the Christians who will not listen to those letters and those warnings, he can doubly warn them and they will be doubly responsible. The accuser of the brethren. You know, Satan has the modern church today pegged really well. In Revelation, 5 out of the 7 churches, Christ had some warning for. And he told them, "I'm coming quick. You better fix this before I get back." Satan knows the same is still true today. Satan knows most Christians don't care what the letters to the 7 churches say. And they really don't care what Christ calls them to be either. They think they're just going to get in a golden ticket regardless. But the test is, and Satan knows what the test is, do you really love the bridegroom? The very first letter in Revelation to Ephesus, Christ told them, "You're doing good works, you're doing good things, but you've left your first love." That's what it's going to boil down to. Do you really love God? Or are you just going through the motions? Are you a hypocrite? If you haven't yet, please watch the letters to the 7 churches. This is the checklist and the criteria that God is looking for in his bride. He's looking for who really loves me. or who just says they love me. Well, on the 11th, it hit social media, the hashtag Lucifer is coming. Lucifer is coming. We've heard the calls for peace and safety, and now he can blatantly put it out in media and laugh at it, and people will laugh at the warnings. If they won't even listen to the book of Revelation and Christ's warnings, it's really sad. Lucifer is coming, and it's talked about on the social media and news, and people commenting about it, and they're promoting the upcoming series, Lucifer. But then on the same day, a Google Doodle was released related to the women's suffrage movement, and as a woman holding up the words, deeds, not words. Deeds, not words. That's what's going to matter. You can say you love Christ, but he's looking for fruit. He's looking for evidence of your faith. When the Son of Man returns, shall he find faith on the earth? He's looking for evidence that we love him, not just words, not just saying I love him, not just that I like God, but that I've prepared my heart and life and I've made myself ready. When you clicked on the Google Doodle just to see what it was talking about women's rights activist Alice Paul. But one quote that they had caught my attention. There will never be a new world order until women are a part of it. So they used this particular day to bring up this aspect and this particular quote and to drive it home. And that's what we've been seeing over the past few days with the pyramids. That is the new world order that they've been building. This is just another announcement of the exact same thing. But then that is also connected back to the Sherlock Holmes piece that came out on New Year's Day. And if you got a chance to watch it, the women's suffrage movement was a very big part of the plot line of that story. So this Google Doodle is linking and pulling up a lot of the symbolism and echoing it from the Sherlock piece that we've already talked about. And when you tie the two together, deeds, not words, and what was the main subject of the Sherlock Holmes? The abominable bride. This is a message for the bride. It's another legal notice, serving notice to the bride. Who do you really love? You have to prove it. The Google Doodle also reminded me of the Morton salt logo. Salt being spread out on the ground because it has lost its savor and is henceforth good for nothing. Salt that has been refined and purified so that it looks good and tastes good and doesn't offend anybody and has a lukewarm presentation so that it's even keeled and everybody likes it. Highly processed and highly refined salt has lost a lot of its savor and it's good for nothing. It's poured out. Well, also on the 11th was the college football championship at the Phoenix Stadium. Big event, got a lot of attention, but again, pulling back the attention to where the halftime show took place. And then also on the same day, a media mention was made up for another Marvel Studio production, the Black Panther. And we talked about before, Marvel Studios. Marvel. It is no marvel if Satan be transformed as an angel of light. And there's been a lot of talk about various Marvel characters and movies and spin-offs and spin-offs of spin-offs. Because they're really hitting it home right now, a lot of the symbolism that they've been indoctrinating and programming and preconditioning people with over the past few decades, it's all coming together now. In fact, the latest one that they were talking about, Avengers Infinity War, that they talked about 2 days ago, that was the whole concept. They were literally bringing all of the characters and the symbolism together. It is all coming together right now. And they even were talking about the time stones and tesseracts and things that we've talked about before. It's all coming together now. And they even talked about Doctor Strange, who is the character from the Sherlock Holmes, who's basically a sorcerer and can manipulate time. They're wrapping all of this media messaging, they are wrapping it together ultra tight. It's very deep programming, but they're announcing it all right now because they are ready. The Lucifer is coming hashtag was announcing the Lucifer TV series that starts on the 25th of January. So just a few days away, not too far. But then it's only 2 days after the 23rd, which is a full moon. And we had talked before about the Black Knight Decoded, and we've been examining a lot of the circumstantial evidence of people trying to figure out when is exactly it pointing to, because it mentions on the next full moon that a lot of things would be put into play. So the Black Knight Decoded. Now, it's very interesting. The short film starts out talking about Nikola Tesla in connection with aliens. And it's all disinformation and propaganda, but people had initially speculated that the next full moon, which was a few days after they released the film, they were looking toward that period because that was the most obvious. And then that passed without anything significant happening. So then more examination when looking at the sequence of the months that they portrayed in the short film strongly seemed to point toward Christmas Day, which was the next full moon. And a lot of symbolism did happen on that day. But when we consider the visual messaging that was tied in when they said that messaging, it was at the Times Square. So they were connecting this message is in context of Times Square. And of course that harkens to New Year's Eve. So if we take that as the marker from New Year's, the next full moon, that would be January 23rd. And it seems with a lot that we're seeing pushed out recently, this might be very strong to suspect that, especially with all the pushes for aliens and how even they have said their stage is set and they are ready. But in context of the Times Square event, that definitely does seem to be a strong circumstantial evidence for that they might be pointing toward the 23rd-ish. Now, of course, the day right before that, the 5th Wave series will also start. That's also about aliens and causing a lot of destruction. And that's what we are expecting right now in the prophetic sense. We've heard the calls for peace and safety, so we know sudden destruction is coming. So it is rather suspicious that at the exact same time with this full moon, that seems to strongly tie in with the Times Square, that they are also putting the exact same message of aliens and sudden destruction out as well. It is suspicious. We always have to keep in mind, even if we see a day, even a potential day approaching, Christ most strongly will return before that day. So even if we're looking at some day down the road, we've already heard the calls for peace and safety, so we must expect that he can come at any time, especially when we do see a day approaching. Another thing that was unique about the 11th was that it was a new moon. And so for the lunar calendar, such as the Jewish lunar calendar, this marked the start of the 11th Jewish month on the 11th. And there's a lot of symbolism and meaning behind 11 even in the Bible. It's incomplete, it is chaos, and so it is significant that we are now in the 11th month. And you could even say we're at the 11th hour. We already know we are taking on water. We are going downhill real quick. We are at 11:11. But the 11th started the 11th month, and the next new moon is expected to be around the 7th, 8th, which will start the 12th Jewish month. And associated with that turn is the 50th Super Bowl and the Golden Gate. So we might consider that a high-end date, but it's also interesting that the full moon that they're pointing toward is right between these two, right between the 11th hour and the 12th hour, so to speak, which was right around when a Jewish bridegroom would come. There's been so much messaging with Satan alerting his disciples that the mystery of iniquity stage is set and that they are ready, and they expect a certain timetable. And the messaging has been coming out almost every single day, the exact same message, very strong, in a lot of strong media. And we're talking millions of views and impacts for each one. And the fact that they announced David Bowie died, everyone's going to be checking out his Black Star that came out just a few days ago. We are in the 11th month, and we must be extra vigilant and extra sober and make sure we are ready. We've seen so much symbolism and messaging about Lucifer, Prometheus, and the mystery of iniquity. And blatantly about Lucifer, and then even the David Bowie character, who is the man who fell to earth in his very first film. And then they tie that with the Lucifer that they released just the day before, tying it right back to back. But then when we look at the character from the man that fell to earth and the Lucifer DC Comics Lucifer, do you see any similarities? Check out the eyes. There's a reason why they're bringing David Bowie to everyone's attention at this point in time. He's an archetype of Lucifer. And from the very first film, The Man That Fell to Earth, heavy gun symbolism that was repeated exactly in the Sherlock Holmes. And they really brought your attention to it and made sure you noticed it. And it had to do with him getting a wound, as it were, to his head. Very deep tie in here. And then, the same person that they're promoting right now, his very last film was about Tesla, the man associated with lightning. And of course, the one who fell to earth was Lucifer, who fell as lightning. and we expect the black night messaging to be pointing to the full moon that is also associated with Tesla. Do you see a day approaching? And then when we consider the messaging that even Satan is sending out, the legal notices he is giving out so he can be the accuser of the brethren and laugh at the bride. Just in the past 11 days, he's talked about the abominable bride, the bride who backstabbed her bridegroom, and also the bride that did not truly love her bridegroom and would tell him no straight to his face. And he sent out a legal notice that what God is looking for is deeds, not words. And he will use that to condemn and accuse many hypocrites pretty soon. We are taking on water. The warnings have already been going out. This ministry and other ministry watchmen have been warning you and reminding you that we are almost out of time. We've heard the calls for peace and safety on our website, and in the description box is a link for a handout to remind us. We need to be reminded every day that time is growing shorter every single moment. Have we made ourselves ready? How do we love God? Do we love the one who has redeemed us? Have we read his love letters to the 7 churches? Are we hearkening to them? Are we paying attention to them? Are we heeding what they say? Friend, we are in the 11th hour. Nothing is more important right now than making sure you are ready. Shall he find evidence of faith and your love? Remember Lot's wife. Be strong. Be sober. Be vigilant, be ready, and serve Christ first and highest above all else. Maranatha.